how much did you enjoy the official week one this past weekend?
Well, it was awesome, and Camp Randall always delivers, and Western Michigan did too. Shout out to Lance Taylor, good young coach. He may be one of those guys that in a couple of years is, at a big school. He impressed the hell out of me, and so did his team. The MAC, that's such a balanced league that about every 2 or 3 years, a PJ Fleck story kind of comes along. And, he got them to the last time they had played Wisconsin was in the Cotton Bowl in 2016 when Fleck had that unreal year, and that was their only loss. And that was a competitive game then. This was a much more competitive game, I think, than anyone probably thought. Certainly, Devin and I were just hoping that we could get to the mid third quarter and have a game. And heck, they took the lead in the third quarter and into the fourth. And were it not for a funny bounce on people screaming, Peter, Peter, Peter on a punt play, Wisconsin, might have been behind and really struggling to come away with a win. So we got all of that game that we wanted. And this week we head out to the Palouse. We get a little throwback to the Pac-12 After Dark era with Texas Tech, who's looking to find a defense against Wazoo, who's looking to make a statement along with Oregon State as the teams that were left behind but are getting rich for the next couple of years in what is the Pac-2 out there. So, and then the following week, we're off to those Friday games on Big Fox with K-State, and I heard you talking about Utah. K-State and Arizona will be playing in that game, and I think that's going to be a whale of a game to start our Friday night series on Fox with the Big Ten and the Big 12.
Definitely. Well, and again, I can't wait to watch it, man. It's so good. I was wondering if there's going to be, with your new partner, some jumping around there up there in Wisconsin. You handled it beautifully. Rumor has it you're going to be competing in the next breakdancing in the Olympics in the next 4 years.
I don't have the same elevation I used to. But the feet do move pretty well.
When you stop getting the vertical, you start measuring horizontal. That's how it works.
There you go. Exactly.
That's exactly right. Glass half full. And Timmy B, I want to read quickly. I want to ask you about LSU, but I want to read your top 15 after week one of play just for our audience.
Sure.
And I'm going to go 15-1. You've got Tennessee 15. Kansas State 14, USC 13, Penn State 12, Oregon 11, Missouri 10, Iowa 9, Bama 8, Utah 7, Miami 6, Ole Miss 5, Notre Dame 4, Texas 3, Ohio State 2, and Georgia 1. I just wanted to ask you really, really quickly about Iowa at 9. Do you trust that offense is a little bit better than what we've seen after week one?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if McNamara is going to finish the year, but he looked okay in the opener. They were playing anybody that was that difficult, although I would argue their opponent was better than most of the teams that played against SEC opposition, not named a school playing like LSU playing against USC on a neutral site. I mean, you got the usual sort of mid to late November FCS and or bad group of 5 caliber teams. And Tim Lester's offense looked a little bit better to me in what I saw, and that defense is still top 5.
Yeah.
And so that's the play. That's where I get most of the social media pushback is on Iowa, a little bit on Mizzou because Mizzou, a little bit like Iowa, is for that overlooked team. And again, I had them in the preseason. I did based on schedule first and foremost. And if you noticed, and fans need to understand this when they look at my poll in season, I had Oregon preseason number 1. You don't perform well in my poll, your ass gets dropped. I dropped them 10 spots. Because they did not look good in their opener against a much lesser opponent. And, you're going to pay for it. You'll see much more movement in my poll than you ever would in the coaches poll or in the AP. That's the way I think it ought to be. Every week is a new measuring stick. It's not like I completely throw out where I had teams ranked before the week of games, but if you play that poorly, I'm going to drop you big time. And I did Oregon this past week.
Yeah. Well, before we get to David, I've been wanting to ask you this since we live streamed the game on Sunday. How does LSU lose 3 straight openers in the exact same way, basically?
Well, I think this one was lost a little differently in the sense that defensively they looked improved, but not good enough to go through what they went through late in that game. And I think that what Brian Kelly had to say, and I've seen a lot of, it's amazing to me how social media and or the punditry that's out there that stirs the pot on a regular basis. And that's what they're empowered to do. You know, the hot take media that we see today being what it is. I'm not going to call out any names, but you know who I'm talking about. They'll say automatically Brian Kelly was disingenuous, that he's a jerk. We remember it for what he did at Notre Dame. And I'm like, the hell do you want him to say? I mean, most of what he said, if you looked at it in context, was spot on. It was accurate. It was transparent. It's what those of us in the media should want to hear. He was saying things that I'm going, yeah, I agree with that. You can't have penalties. You get a touchdown and your receiver goes nuclear and makes signs to an opposing player, taunting him. You give up 15 yards on the kick, and here comes Zachariah the other way, and you're going to give up points on the other end. You can't make those kinds of mistakes against quality opponents. USC is, in my opinion, not quite as good as LSU, but if you're helping them, and LSU did, then you're going to lose. And that's what happened in the game. At the end of the game, fans are going, what? They're going to go after the new coordinators. Okay, they got away from Emory. They got away from the run game. I can understand why you might say that. But in that drive to take the lead, when it was 20-17, as great as Nussmeier played, and he had a hell of a game, I thought he looked really good. He wasn't as good as Miller Moss in key situations, but Moss's receivers were making plays for him that LSU's were not for Nussmeier. But he did have a second down opportunity. Go back and look at the tape. Go back and look at second down in the red zone, and they've got a perfect play called in the flat. Anderson is waiting. He's got a blocker in front of him. It's a hitch that's going to go for 6. It's a hitch that's going to go for 6, and Nussmeier is rolling out, and he threw it in the ground. It was the worst pass he threw all night. That was the wrong time for him to do that. And then came the pressure on third down. They had to settle for 3. Nussmeier knew it, and so did Kelly. Now, you got your team in a pickle defensively. What are you going to do? Well, the defense had hit some plays, but you couldn't count on them to win that game. They needed to take a lead and force USC to score a touchdown to take the lead. That would have been a 4-point spread if they had scored a touchdown on the preceding series, which I believe would have made it a little more interesting at the end. So LSU going 3 straight in the opening games. Why does that happen? How does that happen? Well, it happens because you're not playing Western Kentucky, UT Chattanooga. Okay, you want me to go further on the SEC opening schedule? Who did Ole Miss play and they hung 73 or 76?
But Timmy B, like you're LSU, you've lost 5 openers in a row, dog. Like, and you're losing 3.
Going back to Orgeron, you're right.
Yeah, to Orgeron. Like, at some point, this is LSU. Like, yeah, it's great you're playing good teams, but where's the LSU's to beat teams to death? David, I think the problem I had in the second half was not the running game. You stopped throwing it to your best players. The whole reason you moved the ball on the
ball. And the other play caller
only had 2 targets.
Yeah.
Unacceptable.
Meanwhile, the other play caller, Lincoln Riley, gets the ball to his best playmakers, which I want to talk about the other half of that, USC. And just the Big Ten writ large for a second here. I mean, before the season, a lot of people thought, okay, this is a 2-team race, right? The Buckeyes and Oregon. Meanwhile, Idaho punches Oregon in the mouth, really, for 4 quarters. Buckeyes didn't look great against Akron early, even though they end up winning big. Michigan underwhelms against Fresno State, even though they end up winning 30-10. Meanwhile, Penn State really, looked very solid on the road at West Virginia. And then USC, like we just talked about, came out and not just beat LSU, but answered a lot of questions, especially on defense. Looked like a playoff team to me. I mean, Tim, right now, if I said I guarantee you that only one of these 2 teams will make the college football playoff, USC or Oregon, who would you take just after week 1?
I'm sorry, David. I mean, I'm not going to get caught up in week 1. All right. Week 1 is an anomaly in many respects. I think all of us in this business overreact to week 1. That's why I sort of poo-pooed the idea of giving Kelly so much grief, even though it's sad that they lost their 3rd consecutive and their 5th overall.
They'll still be 5-1.
Yeah,
they'll still be 5-1 in a couple.
Yeah, I mean, and as for USC, yeah, they looked improved, but the deficiencies that LSU had in terms of making the plays that you know they can make and having the freedom to call the plays that you want. Yeah, I think Sloan definitely coached. He called plays, and I thought he was a little tight.
Yeah, I agree with that.
There was a lot more freedom in the play calling for LSU in the first half than there was in the second. I thought Blake's LSU defense looked far improved.
Yeah.
Even though the secondary still can't play man-to-man in critical situations, may have to back off that some. But Oregon is still, I'm sorry, they're still a much better football team than USC on a whole. Now, I didn't have LSU or USC in my preseason top 15.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why USC didn't crack in there. But if they can show some consistency to what we saw in game one, then he's really – I think D'Anton Lynn, the defensive coordinator for USC, even more when you think about it than the change that Lincoln's made, any changes he's made in his offense, it was his defense that was the factor. Their ability to stop the run, their second-level linebacking play, and their front four, which was gouged in games I had a year ago.
Yeah.
They stuffed LSU many times over until Emory got rolling. And then I think LSU, that biggest problem LSU had was getting away from that at the moment they had a chance to put them away. You know, I think that's what was sticking in Kelly's mind. You're up 17. You're leading the game 17-13, and you got a chance to put them away, and you don't. And I think that was problematic for him. I think it's sticking with a lot of the LSU fans too. But to me, SC is still a team that over time has to prove it to me.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, in the Big Ten, you look at some of those games that they're going to have to play, even against teams that aren't considered great teams or playoff caliber teams, they're not going to be as easy as they once were. Rutgers is not a walkover anymore.
No, Monungai may be the best player in the country nobody's heard about. The running back at Rutgers.
Exactly. And of course, the fans and especially those in the media, the pundits that never want to give teams they don't know anything about or anything about their personnel any credit whatsoever. Yeah. It's those teams that will rise up and make your preseason predictions look like blank.
Yeah.
Okay. And there are a lot of teams in the Big Ten that have the capability of doing that. I thought it was a wonderful week for the Big Ten. And let's look at the SEC for what it is, fellas.
Yeah.
In the games that mattered, okay, beyond Georgia, who really looked like a team that was worthy? I'm not sure that all of them did. I mean, I put Tennessee in 15 because I think they took care of business the way they needed to, but they weren't playing anybody. They were just poised in my position. I had them just out in my preseason poll, so I elevated them. That's the reason I did. But there are a lot of other teams I could put in that position. The SEC looked awfully pedestrian in week one.
Did you watch Vandy?
Call it for what it is.
Vandy, though, Timmy
Vandy?
B. How about Vandy, baby?
Yeah, because Virginia Tech was overrated.
Yeah.
You didn't see them in my preseason top 15.
No.
Well, the last time we were here, we talked about 3 games. I was wrong on West Virginia at home. I was absolutely spot on with Miami pick against Florida. That was not just a win, but it was a dominant blowout victory. And then Notre Dame took care of A&M. You guys were telling me, oh, I don't know about Notre Dame. I said, well, I'm pretty sure.
I have them 11-1, buddy. 11-1 playoffs.
Notre Dame looks awfully good to me.
Yeah.
And I think where I had them in the 5 hole in preseason is going to be the spot where they wind up. I really believe that.
You have them in the 5 spot? Is that what he said?
Pedestrian
they did.
First week. Let's call it for what it is. Let's stop the hype machine that is the, by God, Southeastern Conference, who thinks that it's anointed for 8 teams. Hell, I've got you with 5, and I'm still getting pushback.
Yeah. Well, Timmy B, here's where I'm at on it. We let off our show. I mean, we titled our show yesterday, "Is the SEC Overrated?" I mean, we talked about it in those marquee games. Yeah, in those marquee games. Well. Here's the way I look at it, though. I can't go that far until I see some of because I feel like, and I think you'll agree with this.
Agreed.
LSU and Texas A&M are in that second tier, not the elite tier, but in that second tier, and they could have moved themselves up into that. Florida, a lot of us had near the bottom. I mean, you called it. You were spot on that one. I need to see some more before I go and see that top tier. But you can't sit here and act like the SEC had a good weekend. You can't. You'd be lying to yourself.
Exactly. And by the way, the kid last night for Boston College, Castellanos, is another one of those players. People don't know anything about him.
Yeah.
Hell, he looked like Cam Ward on the field last night.
Timmy B, he was one of those 9 UCF quarterbacks that transferred out that one year and started. But let's get to the chat real quick with Tim Brando, one of the best in the business.
All right, let's go to a $10 donation from Mr. TW. He says, for Timmy, are Arkansas fans reading too much into our 70 to win last week? Are not reading into it enough? Can we go 8-4? And do we have a chance this weekend?
No.
Oh, Timmy. It's tough, man. Pine Bluff's the worst team I've ever seen. He said no and yes. No and yes.
No. Yeah, yes, you're putting way too much stock in. No, you're not going to go 8-4. So I started with the last question.
So you're saying it's 9-2?
Yeah, 1 in a million, huh?
All right, let's go to Someone Help Me. What a name. He says, Timmy, I'm worried. LSU, although looking good on the defensive side of the ball, still won't push the ball down the field. 18 of 29 passes from Nuss were 10 yards or less. Why are we doing that?
Because they aren't running as many vertical routes as they should. Lacey looked like maybe the Bolitnikoff winner with his
touchdown
catch.
He looked good.
I didn't see anything remotely close to that in a pattern that was being run for Nussmeier the rest of the game. And that does go back to Sloan a little bit and maybe just being a little too conservative once you got control of the game. And by the way, that gets passed along to the team as well when they sense that. I also, if you want to give Brian Kelly a lot of heat, give him heat he did this in the Florida State loss, if you recall, fellas. They got the ball down to the 1-yard line, couldn't punch it in. Remember that? Yep. Get the points when you're there. Just take the field goal and get ahead. Those 3 points late in the game, he could have used, right?
Yeah, well,
my thing stuffed again because they couldn't run the ball. And by the way, that offensive line for LSU was a problem.
It was.
That's if they're not having gassers run all week by that O-line, 2 of whom we're being told are first-round draft picks, then Brian Kelly has gone soft.
Yeah,
okay?
That's all we've heard. That's all we've heard in the offseason about how good LSU's offensive
Will
line
Campbell's
is.
talking about going to get in a fist fight.
He had
and
115 rushing yards against USC.
But I do want to say this. If you're going to be conservative the whole game, be conservative from the start of the game to the end of the game, or unless you have to turn it on at the end. If you're going to take chances, then take chances the whole game. You can't mix and match and change your identity of who you are. Say what you want about Dan Campbell and the Lions. They're going to do it the way that they want to do it, and they're going to go down swinging. But, Timmy B, before we let you go, I just want to tell the audience something. You're a guy that's been in major networks. You've had an unbelievable career. You've been in the Hall of Fame. You're one of my favorite guests, and you came on the J-Boy Show as one of the first big-time guys that agreed to do that. And we agree on some things, we don't. But, man, I love having you on, and I will always be in your debt for doing that. And it shows the type person that you are, Tim. And I always love you, my friend.
Well, I think the same of you. I love guys that are out there pushing the envelope, and you guys do that on a regular basis. Even Tanner has his moments, which is really exciting.
It is, right?
Tanner is just doing the job. And
I can't wait to golf with you, Tim.
Cone is singing well. He looks good when he's behind the microphone crooning. Singing about America.
American made, son.
Yeah, American made. And then you got Tanner, who just, right when you're thinking he's the third wheel, he steps up and says, by God, I'm Tanner.
I have my moments, Tim.
I'm not just
that mustache
with a bad porn stash.
I was bad in porn, too.
I tell you what, that's why he's here. Tim Brando, can't wait to watch you next week, brother.
Love Timmy, dude.
We love you. You're the best, and you're always welcome here. You know that. Hey, what's up, YouTube? Do us a favor. If you like the content, which if you're watching this, you probably do, hit subscribe. It's the right thing to do.